A lot of people here. Hi everyone and welcome. Today we talk about Emacs, how to handle it, and what is it, the reasons to use it and avoid it, and how to approach it, how to start and proceed. The little disclaimer: we will be talking about using Emacs in context of power user or professional, because it's not intended for casual use of very infrequent computer user. So let's start from one basic idea. There is no easy way to learn a tool for complex tasks like researching or programming or something like that. There's no just easy way or any short path to learn and master the tool for such complex area. So we expect every tool in such area to have some learning curve, and also it have to have some properties. For example, explorability. Let me show my screen. Here it is. Explorability is important for various reasons, because you have to learn such tool. You will be using this property very frequently, because there are a lot of different use cases. So you need to find answers to the question how to solve this use case. Another important property is extensibility. Hi, Arya Kiran. Extensibility is important because there are a lot of use cases, as I said already, and you have to handle them, and not all use cases covered already. So you need some way to solve uncovered use cases. It's also very good to have a consistency, because you learn some part of interface, some principle, and you want to apply it everywhere, or in few or in many different places. So you learn once and use it frequently in different situations. Reliability. When you work on something, you want to have a reliable tool. You don't want it to be broken after update. Or at least you want to recover fast and get a working tool to proceed your job. KHWPP says, I have slowly moved away from Emacs. In certain languages like JVMs, IntelliJ seems to be better for this. On the other hand, dealing with LSPs and Haskell are very good on Emacs. Yep, nice comment. Probably on previous Emacs conference, there was a talk about, or maybe not previous, but 1 year before the previous one, there was a talk about Java development environment in Emacs. With LSP, it seems pretty reasonable. But okay, today's topic not about development, it's more generic, but we will cover some parts of development workflows. And performance, you obviously want to have some snappy tool. You don't want to wait hours before something will happen. You don't want to see freezes and all other stuff. So it's important properties for every professional tool, I think. For any complex professional tool, of course. And let's say a few words about text-oriented interfaces. Some people decided that everything is a text is a good idea, and for now, most of the interfaces, especially in Unix world, is text-based. Not only text-based UIs, but the programs returns text that you have to pass to other programs. You have to parse it, filter, and so on. And from developer point of view, you understand that sometimes it's not the perfect data format. In most cases, you want some structured data to operate on it. So it's maybe a little sad that from papers and typewriters we come to computers and get the same text-based interface as we all used in older times. But for now, it's obvious that maybe some structure in the data will be much easier to work with. But we already have text-based interfaces and a lot of text-based tasks and have to operate with it. So we have to accept reality and find tools and improve our tooling for working with text. And I hope in some future we will be working only on some good format which allows to operate on structured data and not on plain text. But for now, we are talking about text and text-oriented interfaces. There are a few more comments. I would say all mentioned ideas also relate to modern editors. VS Code, for instance, processes all of those. Dmitry mentioned a good thought that all those properties applied to another tool for working with text, and it's absolutely true, and I'm sure that people who use VS Code can be absolutely happy with it, and if it works for them, it's quite good. And for any other tool which may be not related to programming or text editing, if those properties are applied, it can be also a very great tool. Probably there are some examples of it, but because I'm not working in those fields, I don't know about such tools, but probably there are some. And 2 questions. What is the correct terminology? Text-based, plain text-based, or maybe ASCII-based? Actually, I don't really care, but probably text-based and plain text-based are okay. ASCII-based is also fine, but not all the text is ASCII text. So first 2 looks better for me. Okay, we talked about a small issue of current world, but let's proceed accepting this issue. And let's start talking about Emacs. What is it? First of all, it is an environment for interpreting a language. Pretty good or good enough language called Lisp or Emacs Lisp. It's also a graphical toolkit. It allows to draw some interface, render pictures or PDFs, or embed web browser inside. So it's pretty versatile graphical toolkit. It also works in terminal, but we don't cover this use case. Sometimes it's useful, but we talk about modern world and talk about modern features of Emacs. And it's also an ecosystem, which is also very important, because you already have a lot of tools, packages, and snippets and knowledge related to the tool. So you can solve a lot of problems easily, because many people already solved and made solutions quite stable and good. And that's most important points about describing Emacs. It's also a text editor, of course, and a tool for managing notes and so on. But those 3 are most important, in my opinion, and describe the Emacs very well. Another question from Dmitry. So if you agree that VS Code has all those properties, then most new users will addict to it faster than to Emacs just because it looks more familiar and uses JS to write plugins. I wouldn't say that most, but yeah, it's quite obvious that many fresh developers will prefer VS Code to Emacs because of many reasons, including marketing, including the language of choice for writing plugins and so on. But I will cover few aspects that may be a little unique to Emacs, and one of them is okay. I will cover it a little later. The reasons to use Emacs. First of all, it's free and open source software, so you're not vendor locked. The development is distributed, so if someone decides to change the way Emacs work or something like that, it won't happen in the future. At least radical changes won't be accepted because the project developed by distributed community. So no organization or one point of failure controls the software. And even someone, if community agrees on some changes, the other community doesn't agree with those changes, the fork will appear. So it's relatively safe choice in terms of locking. In terms of vendor locking. And another cool thing about Emacs, it doesn't get in your way. It doesn't say you how you have to do things. It provides you some tooling, extension language, and a lot of benefits that I mentioned earlier, like a good community, a lot of snippets, knowledge, and so on. So you can create tools or use already existing tools and build a working environment which is suitable and works better for you. Emacs is also a very mature software and it has a lot of legacy. So all the knowledge and use cases covered for last almost 40 years provides a lot of flexibility for you to pick and use and to solve your real world problems. And last but not least, and very important, maybe one of the most important things about Emacs is unified and relatively consistent interface for all different kind of tools. Not only built in Emacs, but also for external tools like grep or mail clients and some other external stuff. So you learn some approach, some workflow once and apply it almost everywhere in every tool which uses Emacs. And it's really great that there is some project which allows you to use different tools made by different communities in very similar way. And let's go back to the chat and answer a few questions. Sorry for holy war. Then if you still agree with me, then we, the industry, still needs Emacs, and why? At least if we have few different projects doing the same thing in maybe similar ways, but not exactly the same, why not to have both, and why doesn't have some competition between them? Because the competition provides better solutions. So both tools will be improving. If we have only one tool and we stuck with it, it will stop developing because there is no competition in most cases. Not in all, but it's very likely to happen. Also, maybe those tools covering some different niches. Not completely different, but quite different. And also, Emacs is a tool that exists for years, for decades, and will continue exist for some time for sure. VS Code or many other text editors are quite young and maybe will disappear soon. I think that VS Code will survive for much more than other text editors, but many other tools which was very fashionable yesterday already unmaintained and forgotten. So I wish that VS Code will be developing and providing a good ideas for different text editors, and I doesn't see that Emacs will disappear in some near future, so it will continue to evolve and will be used by some communities, and also it will help to develop VS Code. And also I hope that in some future both VS Code and Emacs will be less needed, because we will switch from plain text to some more structured things. I hope that operating systems also will be improved in some future, and won't be operating on plain text, and will start doing some reasonable and smart things. And we will get rid of Emacs and VS Code and all other text editors, and we'll be doing some structural editing. I hope it will be the future. But for now, both Emacs and VS Code will still alive. I hope I answered your question. And Anatolis says, let's just remove it from industry if it is redundant. Probably not. Let's just remember for a second, VS Code is Electron, which is pretty much a Chrome tab. Meanwhile, Emacs is GTK. Yeah, there are at least few use cases where VS Code can't compete with Emacs. For example, for using on remote servers or remote machines, and maybe some other use cases, for example, low resources machines and so on. Dmitry says that Andrew Tropin is doing a good job trying to advertise Emacs, but still VS Code looks better. And before it we had more TextMate, Sublime, Atom. In the future we will have more cool editors. Not sure what you mean. Maybe for some people VS Code looks better, but here I have an appearance section, and I will say a few words about the appearance that can change your mind about what looks good and what looks better. Okay, let's get back to the talk, and later we'll proceed with the chat. Few things about my way to Emacs. I use Linux for quite some time, and in my early days I used Vim a lot. To be a cool kid and to do things in terminal and so on. And it showed me few interesting and important things. For example, modal editing and extensibility via plugins and some Vim script. It also had a good documentation and was a cool thing. But later I switched to Spacemacs. One of the reasons why I switched, because Vim script is actually awful language. You obviously can write some plugins and extensions in Python and so on, but for that you need a Python interpreter somewhere in your system, or maybe some other language interpreter you write extension in. and it's still not possible to implement some cases because those plugins using some kind of API and not so deeply integrated in Vim itself, so it's much harder to implement some things. And overall, it's not a very pleasant experience to maintain a reasonably big configuration for Vim. And my friend said that there is a project which provides you with Vim key bindings in Emacs, which called Spacemacs. And I switched to it, and it covered 90% of my needs, and it covered almost all things that I implemented in my config, but with Emacs tools. So I used it for some time, and also at the moment I had some work, so I didn't have a lot of time to tweak everything and play with it. I just, in case of some not very good things, just suffered for a little, but overall experience was good. It was a little complicated because Spacemacs is another layer of abstraction on top of Emacs, so it has good defaults but hides some internals, so it's harder to tweak and play with it. And also it provides you with some sluggish interface sometimes because it has a lot of stuff in it, and it feels a little bloated. So someday I had a little more free time, and another friend said that he doing a literate configuration for Emacs, and I decided to switch to custom configuration and used it for some time. And it was quite good experience. I learned much more things about Emacs, about key bindings and so on. And also I switched from Evil mode to vanilla Emacs key bindings, which was also important part. Actually, I learned Vim key bindings 2 times, because first of all I learned it for QWERTY layout, and later I switched to Dvorak layout because of RSI. So I had to learn it twice. It's just for the record, because later I will be talking about model editing a little. And it was a good experience with custom configuration, but the problem was that I just took a plugins which implement some things and tried to install them and configure them in some very high-level way that I didn't know how they integrate in Emacs. And also I didn't know a lot about built-in Emacs functionality. And someday I had a little more time, so I decided to switch to some configuration, but Spacemacs was kinda slow and not very maintained, I would say, because some issues was in the tracker for quite a lot of time. So I went for Doom Emacs, which is similar to Spacemacs but more lightweight and performant. And I used it with vanilla key bindings, and it was quite good. It was good. It has some. It reduced transparency, so some functionality was hidden under use package macros and some other custom macros. But overall, it was a very good and pleasant experience. And I had a modern editor built on top of Emacs with modern approaches to different things. So, but the whole time I used it, I thought it will be temporary, because later I need to learn Emacs a little more, because I don't understand some internals, and I miss a lot of built-in functionality. If I learn it, maybe I don't need a lot of bloated stuff that comes with predefined configuration. And this is why I switched to vanilla Emacs and started with empty config. And it was one more great learning experience. I learned a lot of built-in functionality and only tweaked few variables to make the work with text less painful, because some aspects is not great for default configuration, and they really needs to be tweaked. But overall, it was okay experience. I could work and do almost everything that I did before. And later, I started to improve my vanilla configuration, slightly tweaking it and looking at some packages, but it's still very minimal, and I didn't want to bloat it for various reasons, and one of the reasons that such configuration is not reproducible. So I do something with this configuration, switch to other computer, and I will need to do something with my operating system to make this configuration work again. And that is why this is one of the reasons why I didn't tweak Emacs too much. And another reason was to learn built-in functionality. So when I built a tool called guix home, and on top of guix home and guix system, I built another tool called RD. I decided to build a more extended configuration called RD Emacs, which has some sane out-of-the-box experience, which is completely reproducible, which performant, well integrated with operating system and package manager, and easily extensible, and vice versa. I can remove every part of it if I want. And also which adds some new functionality, but adds it in a good way, which allows to integrate with already existing built-in functionality in most cases. So my current configuration is stored in RD repository, and for now I use it. And the most important point here was custom configuration, when I understood that I don't understand what happens under the hood, and my setup is bloated. After that, I decided that I need to switch the paradigm that I use to create my working environment. Previously, I just took some interesting snippets or plugins and incorporated them in my setup. I thought, oh, I need it for sure. It looks very cool and I will be using it. But it was just added and stayed for a while, but used once or twice and forgotten. And it bloated the setup, made it hard to maintain and reproduce, but doesn't give a lot of value for my work. So I switched the approach. Now I try to use as minimal setup as possible, and when I feel a pain in some point and it is repetitive from day to day, after a few times it is encountered, I try to find the solution. First of all, I try to find already existing, probably built-in solution. If I don't find it, I research for some external solutions or for some packages and so on. After I researched all possible alternatives, I have two options: pick one of them or implement my own. If there is some good solution, I just take it because I don't need to maintain it, and I just need to configure it, and it's reduce some maintenance burden of my configuration. If I don't find a good solution, I implement my own. In most cases, it's quite easy because Lisp language is pretty simple and allows to make very complicated things in a very simple way. And after that, I practice the solution for some time. And when I'm quite familiar with it, I persist it or drop it if I don't like it. So that means everything that I have in my current configuration, I at least practiced for some time and learned at least on some level. So I don't have something unnecessary in my configuration, and it's a good thing because the environment grows with me. And also RD Emacs is built in a way that you can grow your configuration in the similar way. You just include parts of RD Emacs that you want to practice it, and if you like them, you persist them. Yep, that's about my way, and later we will talk about the approach for building working environment. Okay, let's go back to the chat and answer a few more questions. TGDA says, it's a fine opinion you have, but it's sort of unreasonable to advocate removing Emacs from the industry on the basis of it looking better to you. Others may disagree. Yeah, it's completely true. VS Code looks better is a statement related to a program being already opinionated. There is nothing limiting Emacs to become similar to VS Code. Maybe it's not completely true because there are some technical things that can prevent Emacs to look as shiny as VS Code. For example, you can't implement some rounded corners with CSS, or maybe some paddings in some places or something like that. But overall, to make a good looking working environment, it's absolutely possible with Emacs. And a little later I will talk about it. Dmitry says, I would argue that there is competition with VS Code and Emacs. Emacs community is so small comparing to VS Code community. No one is competing with Emacs. It's kinda, hard to measure actually, and please try to avoid such statements until you have some information which supports such statements, because it's more like doing unreasonable unrelated talks in the chat instead of providing some facts or interesting things to learn. I could provide arguments which prove my point, but I believe they're obvious, aren't they? Actually, many things are not so obvious as many people think. Haha, yeah, Vim script is a crap. Yep, probably not the best language in the world. By the way, Emacs Lisp also was. I would say it was till lexical scope was added. Actually, from Lisp family, Emacs Lisp probably least favorite one for me. But in most cases, I would prefer Lisp to many other languages. Not all, but to many other. And especially to some modern and shiny languages. By the way, due to this Emacs, now and Emacs a decade ago, I would call them different editors. Yeah, actually there was a lot of changes, especially in recent version of Emacs, which provides a lot of new functionality and capabilities to Emacs. Emacs key bindings are for aliens, not for humans. Actually, I quite like Emacs key bindings, and I used both, default Windows style or VS Code style key bindings, Vim key bindings, and Emacs. And Emacs looks pretty reasonable to me. Not all the defaults are good. Maybe I would change some of the defaults, but most of them quite good. Especially knowing the fact that they're here for 40 years. Yep, they quite good for 40 years. Okay, let's go to the next section. Building a working environment principles. First of all, I want to be a working environment reproducible. I switch a laptop or operating system or something else and would like to have my working environment to be here and will be the same and be the same. Also, reproducibility implies reliability, at least some kind. In case some update broken your setup, you can always pick the previous version, reproduce it, and get the working setup. So it's number one property that I would like to have for my working environment. Offline friendly and local first. It's also about kind of reliability. You doesn't depend on network connection to do your work, your writing, research, or programming, or whatever you do. Maybe code review or answering some discussions and so on. If you can do it offline, if you can find the documentation and all other resources, you can run your compiler and environment for development locally. It's quite good, and I will appreciate it in any working environment. Consistent. There are a lot of similar tasks, and there are, I think, should be few interfaces to solve all those tasks. So you learn the approach once and apply it in many areas of your work. Minimalistic and attention friendly. I want to be focused on the work, not on the shiny blinking or jumping interfaces around my screen. And in most cases, working with text, I want to see the text and maybe some minimal information about this text. Extensibility and explorability. We already talked about it. Important properties for every complex tool for professionals or power users. Good. Having those principles, I can say a few things about my current setup. And let's take a look at my current configuration. The configuration written in Scheme, and it basically includes things called features, and every features provide some functionality. For example, Emacs feature provide Emacs package, Emacs daemon, which will be run on first login to my user session. It provides a possibility to set or install a few more additional Emacs packages and maybe provide some additional configuration. And everything is written in Scheme because I use guix as my primary operating system and as a package manager. And the reason I use it because it provides a capability to make a reproducible operating system and reproducible user environment. Thanks to guix system and guix home with their relatively interesting and pretty smart service capabilities, which allows to declare the whole operating system and your user environment in a file, in a scheme file, and to build it in a reproducible way. It looked like advertisement or integration of guix operating system, but unfortunately nobody pays me for that. Okay, in RD I decided to make a thing called feature, and using those features we can get both operating system configurations and user programs configurations from them. For example, feature Emacs provides only user space configurations, but some other features, for example, backlight will provide a user space program which we can access, but also it will change a system configuration, adding some UDF rules to be able to call backlight controlling binary without using sudo or some privilege escalation mechanism which requires entering a password. So RD combines two tools, guix home and guix system, and wraps them and allows to specify such features and build both user application configurations and operating system configurations. But today we're talking mostly about Emacs, and most of Emacs features are supposed to be user space, so there won't be many examples of using of changing operating system configuration with it. Nice question. What is super ls alias? Actually, it's just an example of usage of home services with RD. It doesn't give any cool capabilities, it's just an alias to the ls binary in the store. Nothing fancy. We can take a look at profile, and I will disable guix prettify mod. Oops. And alias will look like this. So it doesn't give any functionality, it's just an example. Okay, going back to the approach for building Emacs. When I have feature Emacs enabled and some packages specified, I get Emacs with no or almost no configuration. There are some basic tweaks for things like the location of custom file and maybe something else. Let me run the REPL and update load pass, and we can go to feature Emacs implementation, and we'll see here that it just creates a few XDG entries. So here you can see a lot of Emacs client stuff which handles different things. For example, if I open Gemini link, it will be opened in Emacs in the Elfer plugin, Elfer package. And here you can see that it just sets some very basic things that needed for almost every Emacs setup, and adjust some defaults to make it more sane. After I get my Emacs installed, by enabling this feature, I start to improve Emacs with more features, which extends the functionality of it. And first feature is Emacs appearance. And Emacs appearance adjusts how default Emacs configuration looks like. For example, it loads color scheme, it sets margins, it sets cursor shape, and so on. It changes the model line, colors, and disables some graphical user interface elements. And that's pretty much it. And you can see that my Emacs looks a little customized because it has some margins on the sides. The model line is on the top and a little smaller than usual, and so on. Why I decided to go this way? Why I need those changes at all? First of all, I prefer to have light color schemes. The default one is good, but this one, modus them, is just looks a little better for me and have a better contrast. The developer of this color scheme is Prot. You probably heard of him. If not, just find his channel on YouTube or find his page on web. He's a pretty cool guy who talks about Emacs and creates some cool tools for it. Okay, light color scheme is important because when you work, you need to be focused on the work, and high contrast scheme allows to distract melatonin hormone, which cause you to be sleepy, and you have to work. You don't have, but it's better to work before you go to sleep and finish your work few hours before you go to sleep to make it possible to get melatonin back and be ready for sleep. And also good light color scheme is good for eyes. If you have a good environment with good lighting, it's much better to have high contrast light color scheme. I don't have a lot of research paper. I didn't read a lot of research papers on user interfaces and which colors are better for people, but it is from my pretty long personal experience. I used quite a lot dark color schemes with low contrast and high contrast, and now I understand that light one is much more better for my eyes. At least for my eyes. Maybe it's not true for you, but I think it's quite general and will be applicable for many people. Also, minimalistic UI. I don't want to be distracted with different menu bars, tree structures of my project files, because when I work on the code, in most cases I do some text editing, going between files by definition, not by the file name, and so on. And even I need to switch to different file by file name, I will use something called project find file function, which will provide me with a list of all project files, and I can navigate to exact file by typing its name. For example, I will type Emacs and it will show all the files containing Emacs in their path. So I will be able to pick the file I would like to visit. And there is a good paper called On the Design of Text Editors. Okay, let's open this link. And it provides some interesting thoughts on how modern text editors should look like. About layout, and here in example of default layout of modern text editor, and you see that editing area almost 1/3 at most of the whole area, and in most cases you editing text and you don't care about tabs, project browser, console, and all other stuff, and you want to be focused on what you're doing. And those interface elements are rudimentary or unnecessary in my opinion, and in case you need some of them, you can toggle them with hotkeys, and by default they should not exist or should be hidden. And as you can see, I don't have any excessive elements in my setup, so I would consider this UI to be minimalistic. And in case I need some functionality, for example, navigation by, okay, let's go back to source code, because source code is what I edit most frequent. And for example, I need navigate by definition of functions. I will use consult imenu and will be able to jump by those definitions. So there are some interfaces that can be useful for my work, but they appears only when I really need them, but doesn't take the space on my screen when it's unnecessary. Oh, I accidentally hidden the chat, but I'm back and see that nobody typed anything. Good. We talked about UI and about fonts, colorization, type settings, and margins. Margins makes it easier to read text. You can see that books prints the text a little shifted from the sides to make it easier to read. It also in most cases restricted in the width, and it's around 70 or 80 characters. Probably 70 characters is most optimal the length of the string for easy reading. Hello, designer Nasser. Doesn't know what does it mean, but hello. And colorization is also important. We can make use of it to highlight some elements. For example, getting comments more grayish, and making some elements more popping up, for example, links or some important elements. But we have to use it very carefully, because we can screw up everything with it, and it should be also quite minimalistic. In the paper on the design of text editors, the author provides few faces, around 6 variants of faces, which is a combination of color and type of the font, for example, bold or thin or light, and he says that those 6 options are enough for almost everything to express almost every use case that you need working on the text. And I encourage you to read this article if you didn't already, and learn the ideas about the design of text editors and some related topics that you can find by looking at references to other papers in this article. Good. We got pretty slim, minimalistic, nice looking environment focused on presenting a text, and it's good for readability, and it is important because most of the time working on development, research, and so on, we do read, and it is important to make this process easier and safer for us. The second part is editing. There are two main possibilities in Emacs. You can use vanilla key bindings and evil key bindings. First one and default one is vanilla, and in most cases they consist of key charts. You type, for example, Ctrl X, and after that you have to type another letter or combination of letter and modifier to get a next part of your key chart. For example, for project I will type P. Here it's called prefix, and I will be provided with a few options for for calling project related functions. For example, if I want to open a direct buffer for current project, I will type D, project direct, or direct, and it will open a direct buffer which contains my nodes repository, and here in the nodes directory you will see my whole knowledge database. So the key bindings are quite mnemonic. For example, Ctrl XP means project related, and Ctrl X, for example, N, are related to narrowing functionality, and so on. So I don't know the reason why the root prefix is Ctrl X, but going deeper, you can remember the following key sequence by remembering the word or topic related to it. P for project, N for narrowing, and so on. In the same way, when you bind your keys, you use Ctrl C prefix, which is allocated for user key bindings, Ctrl C and some letter. For example, Ctrl C T is for toggling different modes, and Ctrl C A for different for different applications inside Emacs. For example, I have transmission interface, or not much interface for reading and writing emails, and so on, under Ctrl C A prefix. And if you read a manual, you will see that despite the first impression of absolutely chaotic key bindings, vanilla key bindings are quite good. Another options is evil, is Vim emulation, or not emulation, just re-implementation of Vim-like key bindings and mods, which allows to have few different modes: normal mode, insert mode, visual mode, and probably a few more. And in normal mode you operate on text when you type on the characters. In insert mode you insert those characters when you type them. And it's a good idea, and it seems a very interesting idea that you can learn it and be very efficient in text editing by just pressing different keys and transforming text. For example, DIW will remove DI quotes will remove everything inside quotes. DA quotes will remove everything quotes including, and it's quite mnemonic: delete inside quotes, delete around quotes. But when I used it, and I used it for quite some time, around 13 years, I think, don't know exact numbers, but it's pretty much time I spent with Vim and Evil. I found myself many times that I don't remember which mod I am in right now, and I have to check the status bar to understand which mod it is, or to type some unconditional key to go to normal mode, and from normal mode to go to insert mode. And sometimes I want to make a simple editing inside insert mode, and I can't do it. So it was a quite distracting experience. Even after knowing hotkeys very good, I still had such interruptions of my flow. So I considered that it may be not very good for attention to use Evil. It's actually no evidence except my own perception, but probably there can be some research papers on it, and maybe someday I will find them and will read them, but for now it's more about my own experience. And talking about efficient transformation of text using Vim k-bindings, I would say it won't really win the competition with Emacs k-bindings. Earlier today, there was a statement that Emacs editing or navigation k-bindings are awful, but in reality they're not so awful. Maybe not the best, but quite good enough. And I played Vim Golf. It's a game where you need to type as less keys in Vim as possible to make some transformation of text. And I tried to play the same exercises with Emacs k-bindings, and sometimes I even get a better results with Emacs comparing to Vim or Evil. So it's not clear which hotkeys is more efficient. Obviously, Emacs uses more modifiers, and you have to hold them, but I doesn't see it as a big problem, especially having an RSI. I would mention that my pain will increase by switching to vanilla Emacs, but it doesn't, and in some cases it's even reduced. So I prefer vanilla Emacs, but I doesn't insist that you have to use them. Use whatever you like. I just share my experience and view on this topic. Maybe I will support it with some research later. Okay. Time to read few comments from the chat. About vanilla bindings, it's pretty well organized in key maps. Go to map on MG, search map on MS, registry map on Ctrl+X+R, etc. It's true, yeah, I already started this topic of prefixes, and actually in the manual you can find probably a chapter about k-bindings approach, and it explains the idea how Emacs k-bindings are organized. At the first glance, it doesn't look very organized, but more you use it, more clearer it becomes that they're quite good organized. Maybe not perfectly, but at least quite good. Another good comment about swiping Control and caps keys. It helps a lot to reduce the stress you put on your pinky finger, and it also works not only for Emacs but for terminal or Vim too, and I would encourage you to do it if you use a standard NC layout or some other kind of standard layout. If you use custom keyboard, it's probably better to put those modifiers under your thumbs, because they are much stronger, and those modifiers will be used quite a lot. And on my custom keyboards, the modifiers under thumbs. So let's go to the next topic, I suppose. Explorability. Another important point, and also a built-in functionality which allows you to learn a lot about your working environment, is hotkeys, help hotkeys under Control H prefix, which stands for help, I suppose. And first one is Control H key, which allows you to type any key sequence, for example, Control X P F, and provides you with some information about the function which will be called by typing this key sequence. It also will show additional options, additional key bindings that are used for the same function. For example, it's been not only on Control XP, but also Super P, which is a little shorter than Control XP. Yep, and here you can use the information about the function, its description, arguments that it accepts, and maybe some references to other functions too. And also you can type, you can click on the file name where this function declared, and you will go to the definition of this function, and you can see the implementation of the function. The nice property of Lisp family languages that they are quite expressive, and you can see and understand the implementation quite easily. So let's close those windows and continue with few other important hotkeys for exploring the capabilities of Emacs. I see the suggestion from HZ that there is another key binding which is Control HS, which searches for the symbol in Emacs Lisp manual, which will be quite useful if you want to read some documentation on the specific function or variable. Another very frequent key binding that I use is Control HF, which provides me with the list of all functions currently declared in my Emacs, and I can narrow this list to interesting one. For example, interesting one for me right now, for example, eval expression, and it will provide with few suggestions. And also you will see the key binding for this function, and when I type it, the help window will be opened again, describing this function. This description is a little bigger, and it also has two key bindings. Okay. The third one is Control HV, which do the same, but looking for variables, not for functions. And here you can type any interesting function you want. For example, Olivetti white. The variable which says the width of the buffer, the number of characters that should be displayed in one line. So here I open the description of the variable. It shows the current value, original value, and some description of it. Good. Now we can look for functions, for variables, and also we can find some information about some symbol, for example, mod line something format. Oh, for some reason it shows not so much symbols here. Okay, for some reason this hotkey doesn't work as I expected, but yep, let's move on. There is another hotkey which allows to open Emacs manual and open the index of it. And here, whoa, pretty laggy because of the streaming. Here you can see the index of Emacs manual, and here I can look for something like mod line and find the section about mod line and read it if I want. So also quite useful hotkey. I suggest you to use if you want to find some documentation. Okay, HZ says that Ctrl HS works only in Lisp mode. Let's go to Emacs Lisp mode and type Ctrl HS. Describe symbol mod. Okay. Okay. Yep, it works quite good. And it found the manual related to mod line format. Cool. Works as expected. Another tool for exploring Emacs is find library function. It allows to see all the find all the loaded packages, including built-in packages. And I just type find library, and after that I type the name of the package. For example, org. Let's just go to the org, which declares org mode and all related stuff. And here we see the source code for this package, and also I can open a direct buffer to see all the files in the same directory. To make it a little more verbose, let's do like this. And here you can see that a lot of org related files in the folder for Emacs org package. And another interesting application of this find library function is exploring RD configuration, because RD generates a separate package for each feature which stores the configuration of this package. For example, I type configure org roam, and we'll see the configuration for org roam package. It's another package with all the statements after loaded, which sets some variables and makes some key bindings which are declared in my scheme file. Those configuration packages generated from scheme files which defines the features, RD features. Good. And which key? Which key we already saw. It's the interface, especially helpful for newcomers, which shows the options you have with the current prefix. For example, you type Ctrl X and see all the possible options, and if there are too much options, they're paginated, and you can, Ctrl X, Ctrl HN. You can go to the next page using Ctrl HN, and you can go back using Ctrl HP, and you can type Ctrl HH. By default, if you type Ctrl H after you pressed some prefix of keychart, you will get this buffer with all possible options which has this prefix. For example, it is how it looks for Ctrl X, but for Ctrl X P it will look much smaller. Oops. Ctrl X P, Ctrl H. It will look like that. Only functions related to the project. So you can explore your hotkeys without which key, but which key is a little more handy and automatic. Maybe it's a little more distracting for experienced user, but for newcomers it's quite good. Okay, one more comment from HD. Ideally, it would link every major mod to some manual, but since it is not a very popular feature, nobody implements this functionally for org mod, for example. Yeah, it may be said, but there are some cool built-in features that not very widely used. And it is sometimes especially said when there are very cool features that is already implemented by people re-implement the wheels and create more modern looking or modern fashioned approach that works sometimes not better than already implemented, and use them and advertise them, but forgot about built-in functionality which is superior. And yep, it's a reality of marketing of Emacs features. Hope someone will do it. Okay, we talked about explorability. We talked about extensibility and appearance. Let's talk a little about completion and search. Doing the work with the text, you need to do at least searching and navigation in this text, but also a lot more things in reality. And here I discuss a feature which is applicable in many aspects of working with the text, and it is completion and search. There is a built-in iSearch, acore, and grep functions which allows to do a search of plain text, but I won't be covering them here. I will cover another feature called mini buffer and mini buffer completion, and few packages to improve it. First is Vertica. Vertica provides you with a list of candidates. Every time you type some command which need some input, those commands called interactive functions or commands, you get a mini buffer which have a completion. By default, the completion is empty until you type something and tap tab button, and you will get a pop-up which shows the options that you can use or pick. But Vertica provides with a dynamic list, vertical list, which shows all the options you have, and when you start typing something, it will narrow this list to the something you interested in. I use orderless for completion, so I can type org timer, for example, and it will show all the functions that contains org and timer words. Also, I can swap those words and the list of results will be the same. Timer org will provide with the same options. Okay, the first one is Vertica. The second one is Marginalia. Marginalia allows to show annotations for the completion candidates. For example, here for describe variable function, which is bound to Ctrl HV, it shows the current value of the variable, the description of the variable and some other flags that I'm not sure what they mean, but it is probably needed for something or shows something important that I don't know yet. I also still learning and explore new stuff for myself by daily use. Okay, the same works for describe function. For example, here it's a little more clear what this column means. Probably it's function and command and something else. HZ says that V is for variable, LV for local variable, etc. Yep, pretty logical and good to know. Probably it's possible to explore the mention of those characters, but actually I don't know how to do it. If you know, please say it. How I close the vertical pop-up? Yeah, I use Ctrl-G. Actually, I can toggle kcast, so you will see what I type. I type, and miniframe is a package which brings the mini buffer to the child frame, which pops on the top of the current frame in the middle of it and shows the results here. Because I don't know like when my current working windows are resized by mini buffer appearing at the bottom, I decided to experimentally use a mini frame which creates a separate child frame and place it on top of current frame. And I find it pretty useful, except cases when I do search with console lines and it hides the current position of the point. Here we can see the context of the search, but for example for this we see much less context, and it's not very cool sometimes. And embark, which allows to do some operations on completion candidates. For example, I write some Lisp code and I need to find some variable. For example, it's Olivetti body width, and I want to insert this variable to my source code. I can call embark and type I character, and it will insert this variable right here. And to show a little more functionality of embark, we can type the embark act hotkey and type Ctrl-H to see all the options that available for current list of completion candidates and all the functions that available that provided by embark. It obviously customizable. For example, you can get a list of all variables which matches current pattern. For example, I can say body and do export, and here in the buffer you will see all the variables which contains the body, and if I type on it, it will show the help buffer for them. The question from the chat: do you use grep or ripgrep? Actually, I use ripgrep, and I use it with consult grep. I type something test, and it provides me with dynamically and asynchronous updated results, and also I can filter those results by some substring, which will be done inside not by grep but Emacs. Yep, it's something like that. And also, if I want to see all the results, for example, for Emacs, I can do the same thing as I did before and export all those results to the buffer and see all those results here. And if I want to navigate them, I can just, oh, yo. For some reason, this buffer a little broken, but okay. In most cases, I can just go through all the results and show them in the other window, or go to the file and close the current buffer. Can I show miniframe and vertica init config? Sure, I can. Here, config scm buffer, and here this Emacs scm buffer, and here we have a completion feature which declares everything related to completion. For example, I declare completion style and set it to orderless. I put some configuration for miniframe here, and the configuration for vertica, consult, and marginalia here. And you can find my configuration at git source hot /abcdw/rd. In tree, you go to rd features, Emacs. Oh, Emacs scm. Okay, let me put it in the chat. Also, there is example directory in RD where you can find which features I'm currently using in my setup. Here you can see which features I enable for my daily work. For example, feature max completion here. Good. Let's go back to our slides. We can use the same interface for searching using consult line, searching through the file, or going through the structure of the file. For example, using consult outline, and you will go through only through the headers. Also, we can use external tools like grep for searching text in all the files in the project. We can switch buffers with the same interface. We can narrow the buffer list to scm files by typing .scm and so on. The same completion interface works for many different use cases and really simplifies the life. It even works for region completion. For example, I want my Emacs to be reproducible. And here I typed a hotkey which showed me a completion for all the nodes I have, and one of those nodes is a reproducibility node, which, if I type, will create a link to this node. So the same interface works in many different scenarios. For example, I can search through all my nodes and find here all nodes related to reproducibility using the same completion framework. And having only those few things, I already have very powerful and flexible tool, and I can solve a lot of my daily tasks. But some other small tweaks and other additions also improve my experience with it. And let's talk about future steps for Emacs setup. I would like to introduce native compilation for improving performance. The performance of my configuration is quite good because my configuration is quite minimalistic and lazy loading, so it doesn't load things that I don't use currently, and it loads only when I first call a function from the package. But with native compilation, it can become more performant and more snappier, which is a good thing. Modline, I already started improving the interface, and you see that it looks minimalistic but still very informative. I would like to tweak it a little in terms of coloring and maybe spacing and so on to make it a little more better. And fonts, for example, for documentation and some heavy text files, I would like to use maybe different font, some variable pitch, which is a little easier for reading. Also, I would like to use different faces for different types of the text. For example, comments will be a little more grayish, and some important messages a little more popping out. So probably I need also to adjust fonts, type settings, and colorization of them to make it less destructive and more informative. And after that, we will already get a good working environment, and we'll start improving in the way I described earlier. You find the pain point, you live with it for some time to ensure that it is a really pain point. You research for existing solutions, for built-in one, for external, and if you find one, you try to use it for some time, or you implement your own. And after you get experience with it and you are sure that this solution is good, you persist it. Okay, that's almost all. A few things that I would say for people who are only coming to Emacs world. You can learn from these materials a lot. It's a built-in tutorial that you can find by typing Alt-X, help with tutorial, and typing enter. Also built-in info reader for Emacs manual. Actually, it's info reader for any manual, but this command will bring you Emacs manual in this info reader, and a book called Mastering Emacs. I read only small parts of it, but it covers all important topics for newcomers, and I advise you to read it if you only start to work with Emacs, and it will help you to learn much quicker. Okay, thanks a lot for your attention. I hope you enjoyed the stream, and see you soon. Bye.